Welcome to one of my favorite conversations from the Public Square archives. I'm producer Alan C. Duncan, and today we're resharing one of our broadcasts from our Circle series on the dangers of big tech. And this one was first recorded in 2018. And I think you'll find that things on the tech front have only escalated in the years since. So what's one thing we do when we're tempted to despair about modern technology? We read old books, and we talk about them. Today we're talking about C.S. Lewis's classic, That Hideous Strength. More on that from our team coming right up.
We are the Public Square, and it's time for this week's edition. Glad to have you listening. Hey, thanks for your feedback on recent programs, and thanks for your support. Thanks for your prayers for Congress, as we've had this 40 days of prayer for Congress recently. I tell you what, Dave, there's a lot going on. Dave Zanotti is sitting here with me. Dave, what do you think?
We're getting a lot of feedback from listeners, Wayne, particularly about last week's program, which you can always find at thepublicsquare.com. So this idea that we gather together to talk about liberty, to teach American principles every day, it brings us into conflict with things. Well, we get conflict right now with technology. Mm-hmm. And we've been getting a lot of listener feedback. And we thank you for the feedback. And the feedback has been outstanding. Very deep, sincere, heartfelt questions about what are we doing to ourselves? What are we doing with each other? What's really going on here? And so I sort of felt like we had set really ourselves up and everybody else up to take this conversation one step farther, because what I had asked our staff to do several months ago was everybody get a copy of C.S. Lewis's book, That Hideous Strength, and to read it in light of the movie The Circle and ask yourself, was this book from 1946 and the film from 2017, that's a pretty big time gap. Were there places where they were both saying the same thing? And because I found there to be some extraordinary parallels. And so I thought we ought to go back and look at this historically. Now, let's talk about That Hideous Strength. And so let's try that today. But before we do, let's go back to a couple of listener questions. One of the questions that came up was someone picked up that we had referenced That Hideous Strength in last week's broadcast, and they said, are you saying that there is a spiritual force of evil underneath this modern technological age? I thought, boy, that's a really good question.
Yeah, and the answer is?
Well, we're going to get to that.
Okay.
Another person wrote to me and said, I've been off Facebook now since the beginning of this year, and I'm much better off for it.
I believe that.
I'm much better off for it. Now, that's kind of a foreshadowing of where we're heading in this conversation. But before we get there, I want to let you have an opportunity to tell everybody who's around the table, and then I'll ask everyone if they've completed their homework assignment.
All right. Melanie Elsey is here, of course, present and accounted for. Alan Duncan is our producer and always on hand. Rob Walgate has sat down at the table, and Jeff Sanders is here, eager to talk about That Hideous Strength. Right, Jeff?
Oh, you bet.
Okay, I knew you were.
Jeff's favorite book. All right, and let's see. I don't know what edition you have read. The one that I have.
That's the same one.
You have the same one?
Yep.
Mine is from, it has 382 pages.
Yep.
And this edition of mine is rather tattered because this was the book that I picked up and read for the first time in 1976.
Oh.
And in fact, I was so intrigued. I had gotten to toward the last 100 pages of the book, and it was time for me to have a wedding. It happened to be my own wedding. Mm-hmm. And I was so concerned that I would not forget this book so I could finish it on my honeymoon, because the last 100 pages was so dynamic.
Ooh, that's a bad move.
I actually took the book and I stuck it in the pocket of my tuxedo and carried it with me the whole wedding day so I wouldn't forget it.
Hey, I'm going to defend you. Everybody's jumping on you. I'm going to defend you. This is a book about marriage. This is a true story.
That's what I got out of the book the most.
I want to
is a
confess.
perfect time to read it.
I did the same thing on my wedding. I had American Caesar by William Manchester, The Life of MacArthur. And I read that on my honeymoon, yes.
But did you have it in your
I think
tuxedo
Dave
pocket?
wins.
No, I was not
person
as
who
big a
married a
sinner
normal
as you are, Dave. No, I was actually holier than you. I put it in our luggage.
Nope, I had it. I couldn't afford to miss it. So
Melanie is shaking her head incredulously that the two of us actually did that.
No, I'm just wondering if I'm the only person who married a normal person.
Yeah. You guys are obviously much more mature than I am. I wasn't reading books on my honeymoon. So.
Okay. All right. This book was written by Clive Staples Lewis, C.S. Lewis, and published in 1946.
I don't know if this is safe for radio, but if you get to the end of the book, there's some honeymoon aspects at the end of this book. There's a new Garden of Eden at the end of this book,
This
basically.
is true.
So
You did finish your homework.
I did. I finally did. Yes.
Finally. But must you confess to the listening audience, God and all these witnesses, that you did it by
Audiobook. I'm sorry.
Okay.
book on tape? Book on tape. Rob Walgate.
I did finish my homework, I will say. If there was a final exam on it, I would have to go read this book a second time because it could be a tough read.
Yeah,
it was a tough
Oh,
read.
it's not an easy read
No,
at all.
not,
No, I struggled. I
not
struggled
at
with
all.
it.
Yeah, I
Wait,
painfully.
we found a book that Melanie Elsie struggled on?
It gave me bad dreams as I'm working my way through it. That's the element that I struggled with.
How totally appropriate, however,
Yeah.
that you, in all of the spiritual sensitivity that we know you to share in your history, your family, your life, that you would be the one who suddenly would become Jane Studdock and start to have the dreams.
Not to that level, but the text and the storyline just freaked me out. But my husband will tell you, if I'm watching a scary movie, I have to, not even scary, but an action-packed movie, I have to fast forward to the end to see who lives so I can watch the movie. It drives him crazy, but I can't handle the suspense.
It's why listeners across the globe love you, Melanie. Jeff, you got your homework done. It was hard, though. You were kicking and screaming. Ooh.
All the way because this is not my genre. I do not like fiction, especially this kind, but I did it. Mainly because I just love and adore and admire C.S. Lewis.
See, people think that sometimes this particular gathering we have is an echo chamber. They have no idea how diverse the personalities, the age differentials, the backgrounds are, the people around this table. Wayne Shepherd, have you happened to have read this book?
You know what? I'm going to be very honest with you. I was relying on my grad school reading of this book, and I tried to find my notes. I was going to cheat and bring my notes to class, but I'm
Did
afraid
he just
I couldn't
big
find
time
it.
us right now?
It was a pre-digital age.
Big time. I'm telling you.
He just slipped in the fact that he has graduate studies on this book.
For those of you that don't know,
Hey, well, I
Wayne's
didn't finish
studio-
graduate school.
And
I
he
didn't
can locate
graduate.
his
but
notes.
I took some
Wayne's
courses.
studio is right near the campuses of Wheaton University. And as you know, he's been affiliated with these academic institutions for years and years. And you just thought he was a lowly radio
rub elbows
host.
and smoke a pipe over at the Wade Center this afternoon, actually. So.
Amen. I've spent some time at the Wade Center. It's a great place. Go to the Wade Center.
Wayne may fit in with nice very nicely if you think about it. He could be one of,
Oh my
From
gosh.
the other
Do
side.
we not trust you anymore?
That was from the college dropout, I should say.
three-time college flunk out. Yes.
No, it wasn't kick flunk out. It was kick out.
There's a difference.
Yes,
There's a difference.
it was the boot. All right.
You people in academia scare me.
Well, grad school was pre-computer days, so I couldn't find my handwritten notes, unfortunately. So I'm at a disadvantage here today.
All right, let's go back to 1943 and Christmas Eve. What was C.S. Lewis doing?
It was before my time.
Praying for his
1943,
nation,
Christmas
probably.
Eve. C.S. Lewis was writing from Magdalen College in Oxford the preface to That Hideous Strength, in which he said, I have called this a fairy tale in the hope that no one who dislikes fantasy may be misled by the first two chapters into reading further and then complain of his disappointment.
That's you, Jeff.
Thank you.
If you ask why, intending to write about magicians, devils, pantomime animals, and planetary angels, I nevertheless begin with such humdrum scenes and persons, I reply that I am following the traditional fairy tale. We do not always notice its method because the cottages, castles, woodcutters, and petty kings with which a fairy tale opens have become for us as remote as the witches and ogres to which it proceeds. But they were not remote at all to the men who made and first enjoyed the stories. They were indeed more realistic and commonplace than Bracton College is to me. Bracton College, so this is a story that begins and centers around academia and science. Now, Lewis goes on in the preface to tell us that he began this conversation with leading scientists of his age and his era. And remember, C.S. Lewis, and he also references in the preface Tolkien, by the way. C.S. Lewis and Tolkien both served in World War I. And then Lewis was of great service to the British Empire during World War II with his radio addresses on the BBC, which are now known as Mere Christianity. So, in fact, if you've seen the films Darkest Hour, one of the things I think that it's sad they didn't include was the rallying point of the BBC broadcasts of C.S. Lewis, because they did provide great encouragement to the British people and to the troops as they stood largely alone at the beginning of that war against the juggernaut of Germany. And Lewis now is post-war, but he's not settled in his mind that the real conflict that created World War II is over. And so he's beginning to talk to scientists of the era. And remember, World War II is a huge leap in science. It ends at the beginning of the atomic age. And so the reflection is, where are we going now? And let's set this in context. Lewis writes now a fairy tale for grown-ups, a story about what could happen to the world in a fantasy based on science, but he writes it prior to the digital age.
Yeah. Remarkable, isn't it? We'll get into this today. C.S. Lewis, That Hideous Strength. Stay with us on The Public Square, found online at thepublicsquare.com. Hey, we're just getting started today on the Public Square, so you haven't missed anything if you've joined us late. But if you ever have to go back and find out what you missed, go online to thepublicsquare.com. And thanks for your support of this listener-supported program. All right, this is kind of an extension of our programs on the Circle, and today our focus is on C.S. Lewis and That Hideous Strength. For those who aren't familiar with the book, Dave, why don't you just give a little, we know so far that it's fiction. We know it was written in the 1940s. What else do we need to know?
Well, it's thought to be science fiction, sci-fi. It's, in essence, a dystopian tale of sort because it depicts, in essence, the end of culture, but it's not one of those, the world all blows up and then this is what's left. This is more of a story of how the world is being taken over and, in essence, being destroyed by an elite group of technocrats. In other words, people who are using technology at every level to basically take control over humanity. And it describes their methodologies. Now, Lewis, in typical way, he titles That Hideous Strength, it's a subtitle, A Modern Fairy Tale for Grown-Ups.
And isn't it the third book in a trilogy?
Yes, thank you. It's the third book in the space trilogy. This one resonated with me far more than the first two, but I should now go back and read the first two over again because I think that the more you read Lewis, the more you get from him.
As you were reading, don't you envision the movie? And I guess it would be easier now to envision the movie than it was in 1976 when you first read it because of the digital era. I think of C.S. Lewis also with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I'm not sure he ever envisioned it coming to theater the way it did for all of us to watch with the technological advances.
Well, there's a subtitle there's a statement on the cover page. Do you all have this on your edition? The Shadow of That Hideous Strength.
I don't think I had that in my particular edition.
Yeah, set mile and more, it is of length. And it's a quote from Sir David Lindsay from An Dialogue, that might be an A Dialogue in Lewis's ancient languages, describing the Tower of Babel. So there's the key to unlock the entire story. It's a story about the Tower of Babel. Now, you all have read the book. Tell our listeners how this story relates to the Tower of Babel, which, by the way, all of these questions have been run rehearsed, so now we'll see who really has done their homework. Jess, you have your hand up.
In this story, you have a secret organization that slowly infiltrates. I compare it to like an amoeba that slowly surrounds and absorbs and becomes the institution that is taking over. but there's definitely a spiritual component to this whole thing. These are people with a spiritual, not just technological agenda to take over. There's even a pastor of sorts on the team of the NICE who says, this is bringing in the kingdom of heaven. We are bringing in the new world that was promised. This is the Garden of Eden.
To make it feel like it was beneficial for everyone.
Yes,
Make it feel like if you weren't on this, you weren't moving in the right direction. Of course, and when academia being behind it.
That has a really creepy sense of application in the current dynamic.
Well, and they were using spiritual elements for power. They were only interested in the spiritual realm for the power. I'm talking about the NICE, the evil organization. They were only interested in the power that it could provide, not any personal type of relationship.
Do a referee timeout here, Wayne. The NICE, the NICE. That, in essence, is the name of the governmental agency that is responsible for taking over everything. They are, in essence, the civic authority.
Yeah, the present day.
But it stands for the National Institute for Coordinate Experiments. They were nasty people.
Yeah, and it never defined the experiments either. So they're very hidden in their agenda.
And yet today in England, the very place where this story, this fairy tale takes place, the NICE actually exists.
That's the actual name of the organization.
And the
Now, did
NICE,
somebody have a sense of humor and decide to call it that, you think? I mean, what
It's the same
what gives?
acronym, but it stands for
something
Some-
different.
They must-
National
other words.
Institute of Clinical Excellence, and it is
Right.
their healthcare system.
It's basically the governing authority agency of the British healthcare system. I don't know. Alan, what do you think?
I don't think they read their Lewis. I think
No, they consider themselves so
or
superior.
maybe they
wouldn't-
did, and
they
this is exactly what they want to be.
it would be like them naming their healthcare system Big Brother. You know, it's akin to that.
It really is quite akin to that, isn't it? And it's just flat out freaky, especially when you think about some of the stories we've had on the public square about people dying and not getting health care and
Anything
the death
but
of
nice.
children, and you go, my goodness,
Alfie
So-
Evans.
Alfie Evans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this evil organization infiltrates, takes over, and so forth, and it seems as though it is unstoppable. Much like the Tower of Babel is enormous, it has full support by the people in power, and yet another voice from beyond speaks. There's another force from beyond that the bad guys have not thought about.
Thank you. Thank you for not taking it to the conclusion. But let's go back to the Tower of Babel for just a second. Parallels between the NICE and the theory of the cosmic takeover, the global takeover of the NICE, of Western culture, and the Tower of Babel. Were both technologies?
Yeah. Yeah, building a tower to reach into heavens, a ziggurat, certainly was using the technology of the day. You bet.
And what was the purpose of the technology?
Well, astrology, to chart the stars. It says to reach into the heavens.
And in essence,
So
to define reality.
Yeah, to understand the gods and to define reality.
So it was the world's first giant cell tower?
Well, Alan said a word earlier that also resonated with me, the manipulative aspect, the way that things are manipulated to make people believe that this is the only way to go. And it's almost like it's the cool thing, right?
Yeah, well,
But it was false.
And the Tower of Babel was also to unite all of mankind together to do this project, all under the leadership of
In a singular purpose.
Yeah, of leadership of Nimrod at the time, but a one world government. Actually,
Both were technologies. Both were designed to accomplish certain objectives of unanimity under a single leader, and both were built upon false pretense. In this regard, not just the spiritual side, but remember what the Tower of Babel was built from.
bricks,
And
mortar.
it was pretty bad stuff, right?
Yeah.
Remember, it was junk. The actual content, you read the Bible, the actual content of the brick and mortar that was used was pretty cruddy stuff, which is why it fell.
Must have gone to the low bidder.
Maybe it was. Maybe the Tower of Babel then was a government project. Then,
Certainly it was. It was the first one, and it was a centralization, and in fact, it was built upon false pretense, both philosophically, theologically, and technically.
Well, it was an affront to one of the first commands that God gave mankind, to fill the earth and subdue it. They literally say the reason they're building it is so that they are not scattered abroad on the face of the whole earth. They're directly defying God's admonition to mankind to fill the earth.
It was in essence of man, combined community, thus the state, in essence, displacing the supernatural reality of God.
Where do you get the it was inferior material? Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly.
When you study the actual Hebrew content behind the words, you find that it's not the same kinds of bricks.
Brick for stone, bitumen for mortar. Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah, they didn't use great stuff. They didn't use great stuff.
Building on a very shaky foundation, huh?
Yeah. And so that, which takes us then to that whole discussion at the end of the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus talks about what's your foundation, what are you built upon? So it was a human effort, energy, as opposed to the order of the Creator. And that, of course, is quite similar in the setup of the nice. Now, the question we've got to ask ourselves is, okay, fine, that's an old story in the Bible, and that's an old story from 1946 in C.S. Lewis. So what? What could it possibly have to do with application today? First question being technology. Our premise here in the discussion of the circle is that the rise of technology, the kind of technology that we have today, particularly in artificial intelligence and in the communication networks, has brought us to the place where it is actually possible from a central tower, if you will, or a central place of authority, that in fact human beings can be controlled. They can be controlled. What happens to you can be controlled by a central agency based upon artificial intelligence, and that technology can determine your reality. Now, is that possibly true? Let me give a quick scenario. Let me just cast a story without notes now from a Lewis-like point of view. Here's a 1-minute synopsis before we take a break. You get up in the morning because you thought today would be the day you would go to work and do the following. You have certain tasks to accomplish and things to do at the bank and things to go through. So you get up in the morning and you check your computer and it says that you don't have access to your email. Something's gone wrong with your system, but you're busy. You don't really have time. And so you head to your car and you're about to take off and head to work, but your car won't start. It's absolutely dead. You hit the garage door to go out to talk to your neighbor and suddenly find out the power's no longer on. You come back in to talk to your wife and family, and you go to hit the water to fill up the coffee machine, and you find that you actually have no water as well. And suddenly you realize it seems like everything is marshaled against you. Every one of those technological devices that you have set up and established with electricity and digital technology have suddenly brought you to a place where you're not only stopped, you're not only paralyzed, but in essence, you're in exile. And you walk outside thinking, surely the power's out in the whole neighborhood, the water's out in the whole neighborhood. No one else's car can work. We've had an EMP attack. And what you really find out is that someone pushed a button and decided that today was the day you would become the exile because you are no longer wanted in the society in which you live.
You know, I just read a news story. I saw that the country of Ethiopia turned off the internet to the whole country for a few days. They just didn't want it on. They just shut it down. And we had a mini experience at our home without the internet for 3 days for technological reasons, and it really caused you to think, what happens? You know,
well, of course, the character in my story simply goes to the drawer and pulls out thousands of dollars and starts to walk. Problem is, of course, since all of his banking is online, that's where his money is too, so he's got no money either.
Yeah. Oh, boy. Well, we're not even to the scariest part yet. We'll get there here in the Public Square today. Stay with us.
Spreading the light of liberty across the land. Now back to the Public Square.
Here we go. More of our discussion on the Public Square today, based on That Hideous Strength by C.S. Lewis. All right, around the table, Dave Zanotti, Melanie Elsey, Jeff Sanders, and Rob Walgate. I'm Wayne Shepherd. Rob, you've got the mic here.
Oh, Wayne, wait just a second. He just literally looked for a story online, and it popped up like this very second. So
Wait a minute. He's not allowed online during this discussion.
Bringing it straight into the studio. Go ahead, Rob.
Now, there's a story on Yahoo that talks about, we're talking about putting people in exile or not allowing people to have access to the thing. There's a story regarding Uber, the ride-sharing services, that says their artificial intelligence can determine, based by the way you hold your phone, based by the way you do things and make decisions, what time it is, based on previous characteristics of yourself, whether or not you are intoxicated when requesting a ride. Now, some people are saying that could allow them to eliminate drivers from picking up people they think are intoxicated based upon their behaviors, or some people are worried this will allow fare gouging because they know you're intoxicated. Maybe you can.
Isn't that the whole premise of Uber, being able to get people who are intoxicated off the roads? Wouldn't you rather have them in the back of an Uber than driving a car?
Rob, do you think maybe the phone was listening to our conversation and produced that story just for you?
Are you saying phones?
Oh my goodness!
Listen
here
to
we go again.
conversation.
Turn Siri off
Cue the
after
Twilight
last
Zone.
week?
Only half.
I
laughing.
tried. She keeps turning herself back on.
I'm serious.
Which
nowadays.
brings us back to
Serious.
last week's edition of the program, talking about just a series of articles that had come into our shop within a period of 72 hours about this rampant pace of technological invasion, which brings us to a question. At what level is privacy a privilege? At what level is privacy a right? Because you see, this is a question that our culture has to wrestle with now in light of the digital technological age that we're in. There are principles that have applied from the Tower of Babel, even from the Garden of Eden forward, on this question that we've accepted as being sort of the standard. But now, how do these standards measure up in light of the technological world? So at what point is privacy a privilege? At what point is it a right? Who has the right to listen to you just because they can?
And is there a way to be just halfway private or a little bit private? Because in my experiences over the past few months, the one person that I asked a question about or tried to get in contact with regarding a radio program, the only one that said, yeah, we really can't reach her. We're not sure what's going on unless we call the neighbor, was someone I was looking for that's Amish. That was the only person that you couldn't get a hold of or at least talk to. So when it comes from a privacy perspective, I know they're very private.
I see. I'm listening to what everyone's saying, and I'm thinking in education, some of this stuff has been going on for decades and decades before we even had the technology. I mean, there were some testing systems that were back in the 70s in, for example, the state of Pennsylvania, where they were assessing attitudes to assess whether or not you could become a quality citizen. And all of that was measured on these scales, these scaled scores where they would score you. Sample question, just to give you a quick example. 2 children or students go out at night and they paint funny sayings of pictures on buildings. From my perspective, it's a vandalism club. It's a club. Under what conditions would you join? And the state had a correct answer under a condition that you would avoid punishment. And you would lean toward peer pressure. It was a bizarre piece of the research that I've been involved with in the last several decades. But states across the country now are still doing that. Ohio is currently proposing that in their strategic plan, that they would assess the characteristics of children as a part of graduating or moving from one grade level to another. It's just weird.
When these things started, we were in the pre-digital era.
In the 70s, yes.
Now, so the question is, what part of your privacy is a privilege? What part is a right? Now, let's take it to second stage then. What part of your data is, in essence, your property? And which part is not under your control or not? You see, these things are all connecting, and we don't have any answers for these questions, by the way.
And when we talk about this, when you say your data and property, the technology we're using, they view us as the data and their property. We are the property that they're able to use.
And it's also important to know that they'll tell you we can keep your information confidential, but confidential and anonymity are 2 different things.
All right, so troubled is, so how does this fit into that hideous strength? In the world in which Lewis predicted, basically, the big brother figure knew all. In fact, let's take for just a second. Let's switch over from Lewis to Orwell, because Lewis preceded Orwell. All right, let's take a look at the film. When you look at the film, 1984, it shows a passage where the character is committing a crime, and the crime is that the character has paper and pencil. You're not allowed to have that, and the crime is that in his own home, he is beginning a journal, which is against the law. And the way that he does it is there's a big screen in his apartment flat, and the big screen is two-way. Now, this is pretty progressive if you're thinking Orwell doing this, talking about 1984, and he's writing this in the 40s. And the only way that this person can write, if you look at the film, he's up into the corner of the wall where the screen can't see him. He's outside of the lens of the camera, and that's where he does his writing. But he knows that the minute that he opened the book, he was dead if he was caught to the state.
So he was the property. He was the state's property. If you have to operate the way that they want you to operate, you're their property, correct?
And they were seeing everything, and they were controlling all messaging. And in essence, the people were the subject to the state.
Well, we mentioned last week briefly that George Orwell wrote a review of Lewis's book, That Hideous Strength, before his book, 1984, ever came out. I think now in the culture, people have to read 1984 in school. There have been films made of it. For whatever reason, that book has been put forward much more than That Hideous Strength. But I think it's very important to place
because it's a lot easier to read than That Hideous Strength.
Well, and there's not the spiritual components. I think there might be some of that at play here. So I thought it'd be important just for cultural context to read a little piece of Orwell's review of Lewis's work.
Sure.
Orwell, writing in the Manchester Evening News, August 16th, 1945, just a piece of it, says of Lewis's book, his book describes the struggle of a little group of sane people against a nightmare that nearly conquers the world. A company of mad scientists, or perhaps they are not mad, but have merely destroyed in themselves all human feeling, all notion of good and evil, and are plotting to conquer Britain, then the whole planet, then other planets, until they have brought the universe under their control. All superfluous life is to be wiped out, all natural force is tamed, the common people are to be used as slaves and vivisection subjects by the ruling caste of scientists, who even see their way to conferring immortal life upon themselves. Man, in short, is to storm the heavens and overthrow the gods, or even become a god himself. There is nothing outrageously improbable in such a conspiracy. Again, that's George Orwell's opinion of Lewis's book, That Hideous Strength, before 1984 was ever written.
Two things we need to bring to the table. These folks saw, as Orwell did in his imagination, the rise of these technologies. But now these technologies are here. But they're here at levels we had not anticipated them. And a second point of important observation, most of these stories involved a centralized control of a single government agency dominating the world. The world in which we're talking about, the circle, is a world of private corporations. They, in essence, make up a technocracy, a form of government and power outside of civil government.
I think
or
in some
outside
cases,
of any single civil government, because they're global.
and I think in some cases they actually run the government, certain governments.
And you can't vote them out.
Yeah.
I got to call a timeout. This is so fascinating to listen to, isn't it? And if you missed part of it, please go online to thepublicsquare.com and back us up to the start of this program through our podcast. You can also use our smartphone app for that, The Public Square. We call this segment 4 of The Public Square. There's another segment to come, and don't miss any of this program as we talk about technology here today on The Public Square with our panel. I'm Wayne Shepherd. All right, Dave Zanotti, take it away.
Well, Jeff made a good point during break. He said, we've gotten a number of listeners who have written in saying, this stuff's really depressing me. That's really, and that's understandable because it's a dark picture. And if you just add up all the articles that we've been studying for the last several weeks and just look at them, it's a bleak moment. There are forces out there that are quite honestly out of control and on agenda, and it's creepy. I mean, Lewis has got nightmare stuff in here about vivisection, about animal experimentation, about combining body parts, about keeping dead heads alive, and that's one of the central images of the film. In other words, there's a sense he's a precursor of artificial intelligence.
Yeah, think of how much ahead of his time he was to think up all these things.
All of this stuff is here. I mean, it's here right now. All of the technology. We're so far beyond that book in regards to our technologies today.
And the technology touches almost every aspect of our lives, from the cars we drive to the computers we're on.
And so there is a feeling that we are being encircled. Now, the question is there hope? Well, let's remember, Lewis wrote this fairy tale for a reason. And the question I've got asked is, does the fairy tale have a happy ending?
Well, in That Hideous Strength, it does.
Babel falls.
Yes. There's a force from outside that is stronger.
There is a spiritual force that is above, beyond, beneath, beside.
That no one really saw coming.
And when you look at it from, I did view That Hideous Strength as a marriage story as well, with the characters Mark and Jane. And you look at that marriage, that strengthening, that coming together, that love. That was such an encouraging aspect as it is.
But not at the beginning. I was depressed at the beginning because as a married couple...
Well, you fast forward to the end of the book.
I know, but you have to get past the first couple chapters if you're going to read the book.
Because it's very discouraging, but it reads like today.
Because they are clueless to one another what each other needs.
Well, he's setting up how bad it can be and then showing a path forward.
And part of the parallel is the deconstruction of human love in the context of marriage and family, which is the birthing place that gives the technocracy the ability to grow and thrive and influence. So there's multiple tales inside the fairy tale.
Well, yes, because it took you in, Melanie. I can think about those things you were having nightmares about as the nightmares were being not illustrated, as they were being written about on the pages, those other nightmares. So, I mean, that's very easy to see how that all could fall into place and happen.
So the story of That Hideous Strength is a spiritual story, as is the story of the Tower of Babel. Now, you could say, well, Babel falls, the fairy tale ends, happy ending, there's a spiritual force, God is there, and people always say to me, I read the end of the book, we win. Now, excuse me, we don't win. He wins. There's a lot of casualties between here and there. The reality of the matter is that God is always going to win in the end. The question is, what does he call us to do in the process? And how do we process this from a biblical point of view? Let's turn to 2 Corinthians chapter 10. Jeff, read to us one of the passages that I think applies here when St. Paul is talking to the church in Corinth saying, look, there are spiritual conflicts here, and we need to be properly set in our minds to address them.
Yeah, 2 Corinthians 10, verse 3. For though we walk in the flesh, we are not waging war according to the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power to destroy strongholds. We destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive to obey Christ.
Paul makes it clear to us that the battle begins in the realm of thought.
Yes, it does.
In other words, the battle begins in the realm of intelligence and of design. So when Mark Zuckerberg stands before Congress and says artificial intelligence is going to fix all these questions that you have about privacy and about data and about personal rights, we're going to fix that with privacy. We're going to fix that with artificial intelligence. We're going to fix that with in other words, we have the thoughts that will fix everything that's bugging you. But whose thoughts are they?
Isn't the artificial intelligence is what scares me about privacy?
That's a whole bait and switch argument, though. Look at what I'm saying over here so you won't pay attention to what we're doing over here.
But isn't it fascinating that Zuckerberg understands that the argument is in the realm of thought?
Didn't his thoughts get us into this mess to begin with?
Well, that's a very good question, isn't it? And it's not just Zuckerberg, is it?
Sure.
We're looking at all of the big tech companies, whether it's Google, whether it's Apple, whether it's Amazon, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, all of these technologies that surround us, the technologies that control our water, our lights, our heat, our gas, our bank accounts, our automobiles, our ability to transport, our ability to make reservations, our ability to do virtually everything that is linked into it, not just a power grid, but now a software grid that is controlled not by the government, but by private corporations who could decide that you don't fit any longer in their thought pattern.
And we're now hearing from software engineers who wrote the code that they're questioning what they did.
And what it's doing to people.
Well, we know that they're already freezing people out, like in YouTube. They are already excising people like PragerU and anybody who doesn't fit into their mindset of what the world should be.
And we know that Facebook has a specific intention to get more involved in politics, not less. More involved in elections, not less. So here's my question. If you start doing politics through the mechanism of Facebook, do you realize what's happening? Do you realize that all of your data, all of your content, every one of your keystrokes is being amassed, compiled for a reason and purpose to manipulate behavior, to monetize the data, to engage politicians for good or for ill, to turn Facebook into an agency of political influence, and I would say / control?
Well, Mark Zuckerberg, we know that he did this in 2008 and in 2012.
No, he didn't do it. It happened.
Oh, well, yeah, he sat
Somebody
before
else
Congress
did it.
like
Somebody
some
else did
like
it.
some
I'll take his
hillbilly.
place. I'll take his
and he said, "Well, gee, I didn't know this was going on. Hogwash." They did know this was going on.
But I'll take his defense as
purposely.
totally legitimate. It was still an outside agency that did it. What I'm contending is that they don't want to let outside agencies do it anymore. They want to do it. They're saying the way to control it is we'll put our artificial intelligence in charge and we'll do it.
Do you want robots, in essence, being in charge of the yeses and nos in your life? Of saying what you have access to, what you do not have access to, based on what your insurance rates are and what they aren't. That's what will make the decisions, is an algorithm. An algorithm will make the decision.
This is where we're heading. So is it scary? Yes, but it is spiritual. It is fundamentally a spiritual question. And it involves the fundamental notion that God has made us in his image and that he has made us for liberty, not for bondage. Right now, the tech companies, whether intentional or not, let's hold them harmless. Let's withhold judgment. Let's say they're as innocent as the driven snow, never intended to get where they are. But they're here now.
And is it too late? Can we turn back?
Wayne, I don't think it's too late. I think we do have a window of opportunity.
We haven't given up too much already.
No, I don't think so. But I think if we wait much longer or we lack the courage, the next generation certainly won't have a chance. Now, I want to talk about what we can do, how we can change this, how we can turn it around.
There are several questions on the table we need to deal with, and we'll get to those next in our final segment of The Public Square today. For the few of you who have to leave us now on radio, make sure you go online to thepublicsquare.com to listen to what we call Segment 5 coming up next here on The Public Square. Our discussion today here on the Public Square is really a continuation of previous programs. We call those programs The Circle. Last week, Will the Circle Be Unbroken? This week, we're talking about, well, it really emanated from C.S. Lewis's book, That Hideous Strength, but we're talking all things technological here today with our panel. And Dave, we've come down to the last few minutes.
Wayne, you've got a couple questions.
I do. Can't we just hold these tech companies accountable so that we can still benefit? I mean, This is all come upon us as beneficial. It's through consumerism and other ways. But, we've all signed up. We all have not read the software agreements.
It's a fair question. I think there's two answers. And there's probably more, but two right off the top of our head in just the limited time that we have. First is personal accountability. Secondly is governmental accountability. There is a question, and we vetted this question among a good number of lawyers. who are familiar with this type of case law, as well as a good number of educators, and looking at the history of companies rising to the level of becoming public utilities. In other words, you sort of can't live without them. When a company gets to the place where they have that kind of dominant influence across culture, they are genuinely subject to regulation because by personal decisions, that corporation can discriminate against people for unfair and unjust purposes. So I think that all of these tech companies are now just about at that threshold. So that's one area where we need to talk. However, when you consider how powerful those companies are and how much they're investing now in the political process, the question is, can you get justice from the process of civil government in regards to these powerful entities?
And when you're not being charged for a product, you most likely are the product.
No, you are the product. Yeah.
You are the product. So these things we're talking about, you're not being charged for. And people are making billions of dollars. Think of some of these technology companies, and you're not charged to use them.
All right, now let's hold right there. People are making billions, and the reason that they're making billions is because they're taking their companies public, and they're becoming publicly traded companies. Look, Amazon has a difficult time breaking even.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for other people's money, where would they be?
And what are they trading at per share?
There you go. That's the point. So number one, check your own portfolio. You say, well, wait a minute, these are great stocks. I'm trying to make money and use it for the kingdom of heaven. Okay. Take that to the Lord in prayer. I'm not going to argue with you. Go pray about that. Where's your investment portfolio? That's one thing. Secondly, we can certainly work on the government side, and we will work on the government side here because public policy is what we do. But I want to propose something that is going to shock some folks, and it's going to make people who are listening right now very uncomfortable. We are now in the process of taking this organization, the American Policy Roundtable, and the Public Square out of the realm of Facebook. Over the next several weeks and months, you will find that we are no longer going to be a presence on Facebook. We can no longer continue to expose our friends and listeners to the manipulation of that platform.
But where do you draw the line?
Well, you know what? You draw the line after you start.
Yeah, you got to start somewhere.
We got to start somewhere. Now, I will tell you where I draw the line is in a frontal assault against the big four tech companies because they're simply that powerful right now. But I would consider that you can start somewhere and say, we're removing. Now, does that mean everybody should? I can't answer that for everybody. All I know is that I can't live with myself and my own conscience knowing that when people communicate with us and they're posting our stuff on platform, they are in Zuckerberg's artificial intelligence web. And that to me is not love of neighbor. I'm putting them at risk.
And this comes down to the very search engine that you've been recommending people use too, hasn't it?
Well, and I'm also I've moved myself off of Google as a search engine. Now it's a personal choice. I won't use Google. You say, is that a boycott? You call it anything you want to call it. I'm just not doing it anymore. I'm out.
Are there other search engines we can use?
There are other search engines, and I'm not going to give anybody else free publicity. You can find them. They're not hard at all to find.
Google it, right?
Yeah. There's one with a really cute icon.
Okay. All right. We're going to let that go. And I'm not endorsing anybody
else. They don't
else.
do the same thing that Google does?
Not to the best of our knowledge at this stage, they are far superior, and they're not. And they're not a part of the big 4 or 5 monsters. They're in essence competitors. So we're not damning the technology in and of itself as spiritually wicked. We're not saying that the technology is wrong. What we're saying is the agendas behind the technology, particularly in concert, has the potential for grave evil, and we've already started to see that in control, in manipulation, deception, and deceit. So how do you pull yourself out of that?
And we talked about earlier the fact of our phones listening. We've read articles in the past couple of weeks regarding the ads that are popping up on people's phones based upon what the phones are hearing you talk about.
Third item, dismiss yourself from all voice-activated technology. Get away from it. Shut it off. As Wayne said, put the tape over the camera on your computer and get away from Siri and Alexa. They're not your friend. I don't care what dialect you use them in.
Yeah, we've put tape over the camera on our computers for a long time now.
Yeah. So to recognize that the only reason that we're paranoid is because they're genuinely after us. All right, they're after all of you. They want your data to use it for a reason and a purpose. Don't make it so easy. Now, all those are technical and practical personal things. Will they have the impact? No, they alone will not change this because this is fundamentally a spiritual battle. That's what the book of 2 Corinthians tells us. That's what Lewis tells us in That Hideous Strength. The reality is, How do you pull down strongholds of deception? Well, the great news is they fall under their own weight, because there is a moral arc to the universe. And as the great late Martin Luther King Jr. said, and it bends toward justice. But there's something we can do to hasten the day for justice, and that is to cry out to God for justice, to pray against spiritual forces in high places, that God would deliver the people who are captured by them, and understand that these big names that we use, they're not the enemy. It's the thought process that they are captured in. So we pray for God to deliver us all from evil. You want to know one way to stop this and pull down a stronghold? Say the Lord's Prayer every day and believe it.
And it's okay to ask these questions and stand up to it, because I'll tell you what, sometimes I think, well, they're just so big. What's the use? What's the use? I'm one person. I can't do it. It can't be done. Look how big they are.
People want you to think that way.
But when they realize what they're using you for, because they're using you. They're using all of us.
Brother, you may be one person outside your prayer closet, but inside, you're a majority. Inside that prayer closet, it's you and your Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. At that stage in the game, that's how you pull down strongholds, is the acknowledgement that you don't have the power, but God is the power. He is the source of all ultimate power. And so we don't pray that God will use his power against our enemies. These folks are not our enemies. These technologies are not our enemies. It's the thought process that we can centralize, control, and do whatever we want that ends up in us eroding civil rights and taking advantage of one another. So we pray for deliverance, that all of these things can be rightly ordered according to God's system of justice. We pray the Lord's Prayer. And you know what? While you're having Facebook withdrawal, pray the Lord's Prayer. It takes about 15 seconds, 20 seconds to pray. When you're about to go, say no. And I'm telling you right now, we have testimonies of people who have been off Facebook now since January, and they say they are spiritually, physically healthier than they've ever been, because this was nothing but a place of discord in their life.
And won't it be interesting to hear some feedback from listeners after this bold declaration here today, Dave?
Well, and some people are going to be mad because we, in essence, have made them very uncomfortable. Look, go ahead and vent your anger, but go ahead, do it in the form of a question. Formulate your emotion in the form of a question, and we'll try our best to answer it. But we will also be praying the Lord's Prayer for you, and we ask you to pray it for us. We are not your enemy. We are asking God for true liberty, that we would be set free from bondage. And if anything in our communication is a bondage to fear, no, we're not afraid. Truth always prevails. But what we do fear is injustice, because that we know that injustice hurts people.
I wouldn't be surprised we get some affirmation as well.
This also will help parents give some wise guidance to children. I mean, if you have young children, teenagers, even young adults, you can guide them and direct them to different search engines, for example. Search engines that wouldn't track you.
Your kids don't have to be on Facebook to have a life.
Yep.
Can we just say that out loud?
Amen.
Kids don't have to be on Facebook to have a life.
And
I
adults,
think more days now kids aren't on Facebook because their grandparents are. It's that older generation that is
They
dominant.
You don't have to
an
be on
iPad.
Snapchat. You don't have to be on Twitter. You don't have
and
to be on
there was
Instagram.
life for people who grew up prior to 1997 and the smartphone.
I think, Rob, you're onto something. If we can convince people that this is just passé and something that the old people do, maybe it'll just die its own slow death.
There's the strategy. There you go. All right. Hey, our time is up. Thanks for listening, everybody. We do encourage you to give us some feedback. You can reach us through our website, thepublicsquare.com. See you next time here on The Public Square.
Follow us on Twitter at...
The Public Square is a broadcast service of the American Policy Roundtable.